Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my listening log update for September of 2018. I actually got a lot more done in this month as far as new releases are concerned than I thought I would. I got 10, I know I was promoting 9, but I kept neglecting to put a different album on the list as well, so I have 10 albums to discuss this month. Let's go ahead and dive into it. That's really all I got. Sometimes Kamikaze is what put this record off of my radar for at least one more week, and is what edged it off of last month's listening update. And I'm kind of pissed off about that, because Joy is an Act of Resistance is a fucking phenomenal record. I am kind of shocked, as many of the internet is, that this record is so good, but I mean, fuck dude. You guys know, if you don't, British punkers, Idols, their album that came out last year, Brutalism, was my album of the year, and I was surprised that they were dropping a new one, and I'm baffled that it's this good. They retain a lot of that sharp political commentary that was present on Brutalism, but they liven up the joint a little bit. It's a little more playful, it's a little more fun, it's not all serious. You know, they have tracks like I'm Scum and Love Song, which are admittedly very funny, but also very tongue-in-cheek in how they're written. The soundscape on here isn't just aggro. They take the time to put a variety of styles and sounds within this atmosphere of punk. And Joe Talbot still frauds at the mic. It's amazing. I'm surprised that these guys had such a quick turnaround for a great record, but this is as good as Brutalism to me. I mean, it's a consistent quality that I would hope more bands would have, and this is how you justify consecutive year releases, when you put this much quality and you grow while developing new ideas. I wish more bands would get this in their head. I love this thing. I love how quotable this record is. While on vacation, Crash, John, and I were quoting this record throughout the entire visit, and it's worth your time. If you like hardcore music, or if you just like aggressive music, it's absolutely worth your time. I give this thing a 10 out of 10, like I gave Brutalism. It makes my album of the year list much more interesting to make, and I'm just happy that this album exists, because I want more of this, please. Continuing with the punk trend, on the next album I checked out, it was the debut album by Witchbender, Crush. It was requested by my buddy Kyle, and these guys are a little on the noisier side. Their guitars are a lot more jagged and a lot more visceral. And these guys don't really waste your time. It's a 12-track record, but it only clocks in at about 20 minutes. A lot of these songs kind of breeze by, and they're just very short bursts of energy. And while I like that to some degree, I do think that that makes some of these songs sound a little half-baked. It's not like a grindcore record. You know, this is like a straightforward punk outfit. You know, it's a little bit on the noisier side, but I feel like if they would have taken the time to flesh out their lyrics or flesh out their sounds, they may have made a more well-rounded project. But I do really like the lyrics on tracks like Bicycle Man and An Actress and Phantom Vibrations. And I love the track Ice Cream. It reminded me of some like early 80s raw punk, and I fucking loved it. And another thing that I really like about this record that I forgot to mention in the review proper is that I like how all of the songs do bleed into each other. This does feel like just one continuous jam, and I do like that about it. I think that it gives it a lot of character, and it's pretty impressive. And I like the image and style that they're presenting, but I think that they could if they tune this up a little better, they can make an even better release out of this, and they could stand toe-to-toe with some of the other great punk records that have come out this year. I do really fucking love this thing, and I'm glad that it's a different style of punk that is well executed than some of the other releases like Turnstile and Idols have put out. it's even more, you know, mangled and fierce, and I like that about it. And I hope that these guys continue to expand their sound and grow more as a band. But I will say that I did leave this release wanting to hear some improvements from these guys. More in the realms of going full stop, you know, they wrote these really short jams, but I'd like to see them expand their songwriting capabilities in that regard, and I'd like to see them try their best at getting even noisier if they wanted to. I'm leaving this band room to grow because I liked this thing, but it didn't hit me as hard as, say, a Time and Space, or even a Brutalism if we're talking about a punk debut, you know. I kind of like this for the same reason I like Turnstile's first record. I like this about as much as that, but I think that they, like Turnstile, have room to grow and expand as a band. And so that's why I give it like an 8 out of 10. It's good. If you want another really good punk release in a year of really good punk records, you won't have any problems throwing this on. This was shit. Don't wanna live forever if they stay like this. The next time I checked out was the latest Matt and Kim record, Almost Every Day. Now, Matt and Kim, indie darlings. I'm sure a lot of you know who they are, whether from their singles like Daylight or maybe even the collaboration they did with Soulja Boy and Andrew WK for a Converse deal. Maybe that's just me that remembers that, but I am not checking this out after not hearing them for a while. I checked out their EP they put out last year. They're one of those bands that I've kind of paid attention to, but I've never been like a diehard fan of. Even in their earlier days, I like their sound, and I think that it's good that these guys have stayed true to their character, but on Almost Every Day, I feel like they've kind of shifted a little bit. There's a little bit of a shift in soul and style in a way that I'm not too keen on. I've always been kind of warm to their personality. I think it's good that they're upbeat and optimistic and fun, and on this, they feel a little more akin to what a lot of bands are doing nowadays with this atmospheric, influenced electronic style that I know my buddy Crash labels the Imagine Dragon. There's touches of that on here, but what I do still like about this is that Matt and Kim is trying their damnedest to let their bright personality push through that shit, because tracks like Forever and Like I Used to Be and Happy If You're Happy all have touches of Matt and Kim's sound. It's just buried under this mountain of mediocrity. I even like some of the synth textures and melodies on the songs that have them fighting against the Imagine Dragon, but I think that they prevail better than some other bands that adorn that style and are influenced by that. And the two songs that sound the most like Matt and Kim songs are I'd Rather and All in My Head. The drums sound less electronic, they have a little more bombacity behind them, and they have that energy that I expect from Matt and Kim in the same style of Matt and Kim. But this album just has this kind of dichotomy in it that I'm just not too keen on. I feel like this battle that their sound is going through, them fighting to stay true to themselves while adorning modern tropes, weighs this album down. But I will say its closing track, while a lot softer, also opens the door for something interesting. It's titled Where Do We Go From Here? And I think it's poignant, you know? They're a band that's been very unequivocally themselves for a long time, while doing little touches to their sound here and there, but this presents a good question. Even if that's not what the song is about, I think it brings an interesting topic at hand for the future of the band Matt and Kim. Where do they go from here? You know, I think it's a touching moment to close out a record that is, all in all, very inconsistent. Probably their most inconsistent record to date. So I think it's interesting that they follow that with this question on the table. And I don't want them to break up. I don't want Matt and Kim to not be around, because I do think that, like I said, they are one of the bands that I look to just see, like, hey, Matt and Kim are still around. Hey, this is still pretty enjoyable. That's cool. And I would like to see them continue to do that, but it'd be interesting to see where they do go from here. Just saying. I give this thing like a 5 out of 10. It's not the worst thing by any stretch of the imagination. but I do think that it left me with a more bitter taste in my mouth than I was expecting, given that it was Matt and Kim.
Yeah, I had the man up, one fist in the air. I ain't finna put my hands up.
I wish a nigga would. I wish a nigga would.
I actually checked out this movie recently, the newest Black Panther movie, and that got me to listen to the soundtrack because, well, I had heard some of the singles from it, and I decided to finally give the Top Dog Entertainment track a stab, and it was a lot better than it had any right to be. I mean, I think the idea of pairing Kendrick Lamar with Black Panther makes sense. Black Panther is this juggernaut of a pro-black, Afro-futuristic, great film, and it only made sense for them to pair that with Kendrick Lamar, one of the more outspoken black rappers in the game right now. And I love Kendrick Lamar. You guys probably knew that. I don't think he's made a terrible record by any stretch of the imagination, even if I have mixed feelings on Damn. As far as the rest of TDE is concerned, I love Schoolboy Q, and I like Blankface, his most recent record, the most out of his entire catalog. I think Absol's a little inconsistent, but I like his sonic character, and I think J-Rock is the weakest of the three, but I would never count him out of writing some decent bars. It's cool. I like that Kendrick decided to bring in some actual African artists and give them some exposure on this on this blockbuster soundtrack. And I think that for the most part they give really good contributions, and I think that it's cool to see a kind of top dog record in the vein of a good music record, but at the end of the day, this is just a lot of pop rap curated by an artist that most people don't like to associate with the genre of pop rap. As much as Kendrick Lamar is in the prominence in hip-hop, even myself, it's weird to lump him in the same camp with other guys in the popular rap zenith, only because he has somehow consistently pleased both radio fans and critics all across the board. It's a marvel. But I think he was smart with this project, like he is with most of his projects. He kept people together that worked well together. I think Schoolboy Q on a track with 2 Chainz makes a lot of sense. Even while I think J-Rock is the weakest member of TDE, putting him on a track with Kendrick and Future and James Blake makes sense. And I like King's Dead. I think it's a great track. Pray For Me, which was a pretty big hit song, is a fantastic pop rap cut that has Kendrick doing that kind of style really well. Same with All the Stars. I think All the Stars is a pretty decent cut that would even fit in as a B-side to Good Kid, Mad City. I like a lot of this record, and I think it's better than most other Marvel projects as far as soundtracks are considered. But as far as a Kendrick Lamar curated thing, it's a cool idea, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. I give it a 7 out of 10. Really cool stuff. I like the idea, but as far as Kendrick's pay grade and caliber, it's still kind of watered down a little bit for what I look for him for. Now, this next record was another request by good old the Garrett, the G-Man, Yokester. Downtown Castles Can Never Block the Sun by Ben Lamar Gay. And while looking at this record, I was immediately excited because it's got a lot of genres. It's an experimental record. And I see the word jazz. Those are buzzwords that just get me a little excited. And yeah, this thing was pretty fucking cool. One of the things I really do respect about this release as well is that Ben tackles these genres in this kind of genre gauntlet style, but he never does it too excessively. There's no song that crosses the 5-minute mark on here. He gives you these vignettes of a style, of a genre fusion. He lets it go, he puts in a good hook there, and then he moves on to the next idea. It was really fucking cool. I mean, there were a lot of different influences I pulled from, that I could hear could have potentially been pulled from this thing. The track Muhal almost sounded like a Flying Lotus cut. Uvas kind of sounded like Tropicalia through the guise of Tom York's Eraser. Some of the horn cuts on here sounded really, really rich. Interludes like Me, Javi, and the Big B just feel really wholesome and really enriching. He strikes a really good balance of abstract sounds or ideas and really sharp songwriting when it's there. There's a lot of instrumental passages on here as well, and I think that they do a good job at breaking up the madness of the record. There's some beat jazz poetry and even some slam poetry sounds on here, like a seasoning called Primavera almost comes across like a Saul Williams cut, where a Swim Swim almost sounds like a Tom Waits cut. Again, if you threw a dartboard at like my niche tastes, this hits a lot of those with a bullseye. I love this thing. This thing is like completely up my alley. Wholly my aesthetic if we're speaking about myself as a music fan. Fantastic recommendation. Thank you so much, Garrett, for another recommendation. I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. If you like a little more of abstract compositions with some more straightforward, not structuring, but there's some really good hook work on here, this might be up your alley. Totally interesting, very cool, and I liked a lot of this thing. I'll definitely be revisiting this more as the year rounds out.
Made it to the stars, disregard the emotional discharge. Can't forget the mission, put it to my heart. I ain't playing games with you to play a part.
Boy, oh boy, golly, have I been excited for this one. Brockhampton's latest, Iridescence. For those who don't know who Brockhampton are, they probably need no introduction, but they're an outfit out of California. You know, the best boy band since One Direction is one of their calling cards. And I fucking love these dudes. I fell into the hype so much last year. All 3 Saturation records were on my album of the year list at one point or another. Saturation 1 was in my top 20. This was one of the records I was the most excited for this year, and I think they more than came through with something fantastic. I like the touches of lushness in some of these soundscapes. I like that there's a dichotomy between lush soundscapes, like on Wait or on Tanya, with the very abrasive sounds of like Jovert and Berlin. There's a good balance that the group strikes, and I think that while not everyone is consistent on every track, everybody shines on a song or another. Whether it's Matt Champion on Where the Cash At, Joe Bon Jovert, or, you know, Kevin on Wait. I've seen them, at least through a couple of friends, compared to be the closest thing we have to a Wu-Tang now, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Well, I don't know how well they could hold their own on their own just yet. I'm at least at the point where I at least would want to see how that turns out. You know, this record continues to showcase that these are a talented group of guys. You know, whether they're great at writing a hook, they're writing some thoughtful ass lyricism, some touching, gut-wrenching shit, or they're just dynamos on the mic. Their flows are biting. They're just great writers, and the instrumentals on this thing are as good as they have been, but are just a little bit better than on some of the stuff that was on like Saturation 2. You know, this continues the pilgrimage from Saturation 3's experimentation. This is a great start. I think that it's their most touching record. It's their most varied record as far as sonic ideas, mashing of styles, and I fucking love this thing. I give it like a 9 out of 10. Strong record. Blew me away more than I think anybody was expecting. I was certainly not expecting this level of consistency. given they dropped 3 records last year. But damn if they don't do it. Again, if you're gonna make consecutive records, do it like this. Do it like Idols. Grow as a group and write something a little more heartfelt. Again, I wish more artists would get that idea. We're gonna go from a peak all the way down to a valley, because I'm gonna be talking about the latest bullet from My Valentine album, Gravity. Now, why did I listen to this? Well, morbid curiosity. You know, I checked out their last record back in 2015 when I first started doing the listening log, so I figured I would just keep on trucking. And this thing fucking sucks. It's their worst album since Fever, or not Fever, their 4th record, their worst record since then. This thing does what I'm not surprised they're doing, because Bullet for My Valentine are trend chasers. They started as a new metal band and they became a metalcore band, and now they're like an ambient metal band. I'm amazed they haven't touched gent yet, if I'm being honest. While there's some moments where their guitars stay really gritty, a lot of this is just pristinely written, atmospheric, heavier than your typical atmospheric rock album. You know, tracks like Letting You Go and Don't Need You and Piece of Me all have those bullet-isms, but in just a worse atmosphere. The lyricism on this thing is as juvenile as it's always been. But I guess what upsets me is that it still is this juvenile. You know, I did a discography review on them up through their 3rd record, and I used to be a moderate listener of theirs. I stopped really listening to them after their 3rd record, but Jesus, this thing sucks. It's hard to sit through. And I'm not surprised I hate this thing, but I'm surprised at how it sounds. Only because while I expect them to chase the trends in metal, I didn't expect them to do this. I expected them to go a completely different route, and this isn't any better. This is actually worse of a trajectory that they would go on. Don't listen to this. It's pretty shitty. Even Bullet for My Valentine fans that I know hate this thing. So, what are you gonna do? I give it like a 3 out of 10, because again, it's not the worst thing I've heard, but it's pretty bad. I had to cleanse my palate of something after diving into Gravity head first, so I went to Virtue, the Julian Casablancas other band, the Voidz' latest record. My first record of theirs ever listening to. I didn't know what to expect, but I walked away from this thing pretty surprised. Only because it's weird hearing Julian Casablancas front something that isn't the Strokes as far as sonically, but I think it works really well. And there's a couple tracks that toe that Strokes-ish kind of sound, at least on some of their less Strokesy songs, like Wink, which even that has a guitar line that does not sound like a Strokes song, but it's a little more akin to what I'm used to from that singer, you know. But tracks like Pyramid of Bones, I would have never imagined Julian Casablancas fronting, or Alien Nation with its more electronic textures. There's a lot of really cool ideas in this, and for being a guy who more often than not respects and adores experimentation if it's done right, I really respect this. There's again, like Ben LaMar, a little bit of a genre gauntlet being dove through, but it's a little more refined. They keep their core unit as tight as they can, and they just do really cool shit. Like Black Hole has a really noisy soundscape that, again, sounds weird for Julian Casablancas, but I like that he's a part of it. Or like the playful synth tones on All Words Are Made Up. Like, it's fun to see him on this kind of stuff. And I don't want to knock the Strokes. I do like the Strokes. I don't want to sound like I hate them, but I just really fucking like this project. I think that if you like the Strokes, and you want to see Julian Casablancas do something completely different than the Strokes, this is a pretty good record to listen to. I like that it's a little more unique. Its lyrics are a little weirder, you know, and I like that, again, it's just interesting. This is just a more interesting release than I think it has any right to be, given it's a side project from one of indie rock's darlings. You know, I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. It's so charming with how it's done, how it's written, how it's structured. It's very charming, it's very tight, it's very fun, and I needed a kind of fun rock record this year that was different, and this is definitely where I got my slice of that.
Prayers daddy not a dope dealer. Read the signs, know the roast, nigga. Run the J's if you run it plays. I ain't never scared of no nigga.
My buddy Josh, who's requested a couple records for this segment, requested the new Joey Purp album, Quarterthing, and he didn't expect me to love it. He just said that there were some good ideas on here, and he's not wrong. There are some really good ideas on here. I don't hate this thing. I've noticed that some publications have given it like accolades, more than I would have ever given it, because while I do like tracks like 24 Karat Gold, I think it's a strong opener. I love the two Wu-Tang features, God Body and In the Morning. I think that there's a lot of average sounding shit by the tail end of the record. I think Elastic sounds like a Sage the Gemini cut, not in a good way. Aw Shit doesn't really do anything for me. Look at My Wrist. It's a track that, again, kind of sounds like a modern pop rap cut. Doesn't do anything for me. Where I think this record is stronger
is when
Joey more ties his sound into that Chicago area sound. You know, even if his lyrics aren't the most conscious, there's moments where he dips into that. And those are kind of the points that I really enjoy. When he's trying to blend that with this kind of pop rap shit, I think that's where it gets a little muddled and it gets a little inconsistent. There's a little bit of a tonal whiplash on this thing. I think it's good that a young guy who dips into that does do some conscious-driven stuff, but it kind of reminds me of like Lasers by Lupe Fiasco, if I'm comparing him to another Chicago rapper, only it pays a little more tribute to its roots than Lasers did. One big thing I wish is that it wouldn't have closed with the Jizza song, because it sounds more like an interlude than it does the final track to the album. I don't think it closes it out well. I think this guy can write some decent hooks and some decent bars, and I walked away from this thing not hating myself for listening to it. I give it like a 6 out of 10. It's pretty good. Thank you for the recommendation. I'm sure this is about where you would have assumed me to have rated it, so that's cool. The last record I checked out this month, another request by my buddy Austin, who I reviewed his EP request a couple days ago. I'm not the biggest follower of Bongripper. I know that they're a doom sludge metal band, and obviously by the name, Bongripper, they're a band you kind of toke to and chill and vibe with, and I could totally do that with this record. It's just 2 songs, two very long instrumentals, and I don't think that'll appeal to a lot of people, but it sure appeals to me. I like some metal sometimes that just is big, it's ambitious, and it's just long. You know, Meshuggah's Catch 33, one of my favorite metal records of all time, and it's just one big-ass song that they made into a record. You know, this is just 2 of those. You know, Slow and Death. And Slow, what is interesting about this, if you listen to this on streaming platforms, every letter is a segment of the song. And I think it's interesting that by the L portion of Slow, they introduce these more atmospheric sections that don't fully tie into the dense, guttural, just visceral, muggy, dirty guitar tones that they're painting with in the beginning until the very end. But I love when it happens. There's a moment when the W section starts that everything ties together and it just sounds so beautiful. The low rumblings on this record are so low. I actually thought I had problems with my car while driving and listening to this thing, which was just funny. That was a funny little aside. But the Slow portion in particular really impressed me with how just absolutely mountainous these guys sounded, how lurching and murky they got their sound, and I loved that. The death portion as well, while not as long, also very brutal, very punchy, very jagged, very aggro, in a sludgy, doomy sort of way. I think some of the riff work could have been made a little doomier. There were some moments where I was listening that I could have heard a different chord progression happen that would have made it sound a little doomier. But I do think that overall this project is phenomenal. I think that this one makes me want to get more into their catalog because I like this very unappealing, just grotesque sound that these guys are pulling out of their instruments, and I love this thing. If you like sludgy music, if you like atmospheric, aggro, drony metal music, this is totally up your alley. I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. Thank you for the recommendation, Austin. And that's going to close out September. October, I'm going to be putting my nose to the grindstone because I've got an album to release, guys. So the first couple of weeks, I might be tied up. But I'm hoping to get more releases under my belt. Once No Signal drops, I'm going to be diving straight into Album City. But those first couple of weeks might be a little lacking for me listening to new records. But we'll see what I do. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. Keep the suggestions coming. I do have some in the docket still to get to. But I'm going to go. I have been Viralrak. You guys have ideas, thoughts, and situations. And I'll see you another day.